What is up, my friends? Welcome back to another sample library review, and today we are taking a look at Mojo 2 by Ver2. I think the name is supposed to be like Virtue, you know? So it's a very clever little company name. But yeah, I'm very excited to kind of go into this library today, and I want to give a big thank you to Ver2 for sending me a copy. They recently updated to version 2.0, which they took their original Mojo 2 library and kind of revamped it from the ground up to really take it to the next level in terms of playability and realism. So today, after going through some of these features, we're going to actually go into the patches and see what it kind of offers, and see how it kind of stands up in comparison to maybe the other libraries that we're kind of used to, and I'll give you some of my impressions there. But you know, just off the bat, when you take a look at their site, you can see it's $500 at the time of this recording, and there are 17 different sampled brass and reed instruments. There's 4 era presets for different vibes, like retro, vintage, and modern. You get true legato for all the instruments, true legato for the instruments, and 13 different articulations. A pretty usable interface, I would say, and it's 100 gigabytes in size. So you do want to make sure you have enough room on your external drive or your internal drive if that's where you host your samples. For version 2.0, rather than having new samples, they've actually really tweaked the legato, basically. And they have a new legato mode, natural legato, which we'll get into a little bit. And they have some new simulated mutes, you know, for some of the instruments: bass trombone, flugelhorn, French horn, piccolo, trumpet. Improved simulated vibrato. I'm a big fan of this simulated vibrato, by the way. And yeah, some other really cool things as well. So what's also great is that you get a sense of how these instruments actually sound through their mock-ups on the site here. So I'll just play through a couple of these. Here's the trumpet. Nice little vibrato there at the end. How about the flugelhorn? Yeah, that sounds great. How about the tenor sax? Love that little flourish at the end. Let's do one more. How about the muted trombone? Nice. And I'm pretty sure the muted trombone is a real mute there. Sounds like a cut mute there. Very cool. All right, so let's dive into the actual interface itself, take a look at the instruments, and I basically loaded them up here in Contact. And so it is a Contact player library, which is great. When you open it up, you'll see here that these are the instruments that it comes with. You can also choose the different articulations for the different instruments. So this is like the single patches if you want to do it that way. But in terms of the multis, that's where you would find all the different instruments, and you'll find 17 in total, and then you could just literally just drag it into your session and go from there. But let's take a quick look at the interface and see what we can discuss here. First of all, right at the very top, you see the different vibes, right? So we'll explore these in a little bit, but again, the default one is modern. So this is the most like pristine, clean sound you'll usually hear when you want to kind of get this more modern poppy sound with the library. If you're going for a more Miles Davis thing or something in the 40s, 50s, you might want to go with something more vintage, or maybe the retro vibe as well. And the other ones that I'm really interested in personally are the legato modes and the vibrato mode as well. And by default, I think it begins with the real vibrato, which kind of sounds like this. Let me play a note here. So you'll hear the vibrato is quite passionate. It's quite large. The rate of the vibrato is quite it's kind of in the middle, but it's on the faster side, right? It's not a very slow. It's not a slower vibrato. It's a little faster. And so the benefit of this is that it does sound more realistic. The downside, of course, is that you don't have as much tweakability in terms of the amount of vibrato and the rate, the speed of the vibrato. So I tend myself to go with the simulated vibrato, and I believe, yeah, you can assign these to different MIDI CCs if you want to, like different faders or wheels on your keyboard. So in this case, I went with the simulated vibrato, and now it sounds like this. right? And so to me, it sounds a little bit more natural because the sax actually takes a little bit more time before letting the vibrato come in. And of course you can change these on the fly, and because you can assign them to MIDI CCs, you can basically automate the vibrato amount and speed to your liking there, which is really nice. One of the really interesting legato improvements they've made is not only to the regular legato, but they've introduced something called the natural legato mode. And so that is where this green key switch is right here in the bottom, right here, the C sharp. If I click that, now you'll see that we change to natural vibrato, or sorry, natural legato. And this is especially good for faster performances and faster lines. I think they're pulling from more marcato samples, which are naturally shorter and have a quicker cutoff, which means that if you want to hold a longer note at the end, you would have to switch back to the regular legato to finish off like a sustain. So let me just play the natural legato very quickly, and this is what it sounds like. And see here, like basically as soon as I hold a note longer than like a second, the note basically just fades away. So there's no sustained, note at the end there. I would actually have to do the key switch so that it actually triggers the regular legato samples after that. So let me try that one more time, and at the very end, I'll add in the regular legato. So now we're at natural. Okay, so yeah, the natural legato, to me, it actually sounds pretty decent because it really keeps up with your performance, and the kind of transitions between the notes are seamless enough where it doesn't seem totally choppy, and there's also a nice fluidity between them. For saxes, it's especially difficult to kind of get that kind of convincing, But let's move on a little bit here. The other thing is, I think by default, the instrument loads with velocity in terms of dynamics. So that means when you're playing in your line, when you play harder, you're going to trigger a harder or a louder dynamic sample, right? Whereas if you switch to CC, then it automatically maps to your mod wheel to control the dynamics. So maybe you prefer this approach. Maybe you like the velocity, and so you can go. Now, I personally don't prefer this approach myself because I like having the ability to tweak the volume and the dynamic on the fly with the sustained notes especially, right? So if I'm holding a really long note, then I want to be able to make the note go louder and softer while I'm holding that note. That's what assigning it to a CC allows you to do, because you can ride the mod wheel up and down while you're holding a note. For velocity, basically, once you play a note with a certain velocity, you're committed to that specific dynamic. So I personally like the CC version here. Cool. Let's go to some of these vibes really quickly. So that was the modern. Let's hear what retro kind of sounds like. And just a quick side note, I'm playing everything out of the box here. I haven't really fiddled too much with any sort of processing or anything like that. I want to show a really true representation of what this library sounds like out of the box. Let's move on to the mic positions as well here. So I kind of loaded up a few of them. The near mic, it's off for a second, as you can see here. And the reason is because when I had it loaded, it was kind of wonky with a few of the legato transitions for the other mics, which doesn't really make sense, but it kind of added this accent between the different notes. So I kind of turned it off for now. And let's hear what we've been using the full mix for now. Let's actually go to the close mic and hear what that sounds like. So it should be like this. I'll go back to the modern setting here, actually. Okay. Let's go to the room mic here. Cool. All right. And then let's take a look at the near mic very quickly. Solo that up. Hear what this sounds like. Yeah, so of course they're not totally smooth just because the samples are loading right now, but let's actually have a listen to this other section as well, where you can actually fiddle with the amount of players you want it to sound like. So right now it's a solo player. If you click on 2, it should sound like 2 players. Okay, relatively dry, as you can hear, even with the 10 players. You can hear how it's mainly like a processing, like chorus type of effect that really increases the size of these players. But you would really only use this to accentuate like a lead line that you want multiple players to be playing in unison for, right? For most of the time, you're usually going to stay with solo, and if you have different parts that are playing different things, like let's say you have 2 soprano saxes that you want to be playing different lines, then most likely you'd be using just a solo setting rather than having too many players at once. You also have to kind of like keep in mind the amount of players you have in your ensemble at any given time. So cool. All right, let's go through a little faster on these other patches now that we've kind of covered the overall functionality, but for kind of the intuitive interface. So here's the alto sax. Okay, so that's just a quick demonstration of these different articulations, and the one thing I'm left desiring is that I wish the shakes and the trills were basically held longer for at least 5 seconds, let's say, and then you can maybe they're automatically looped, and then whenever you let go, maybe there is either an option for like an accent at the end of the shake or the trill, or maybe it just trails off, and there's a release sample there, but because they're relatively short, they're kind of meant as like little quick hits of shakes or trills. And so, it's like what if you want like a longer version, then you're not really gonna find that here, but just something to note. But overall, like if you lace these different articulations together, then you're gonna get a pretty convincing result, as you can hear from some of those demos. It does take some work, but it's worth it in the long run. Also, something to note is that these stabs and the crescendos, you can see there's a legato mode here. So you can actually play those articulations with legato if you wanted to. And if you want to kind of get into further, like how that's kind of applied and how that kind of sounds, definitely check out their walkthrough video because they kind of demonstrate that for us. Let's go through a little quicker here. So we have the tenor sax. Interestingly, the French horn to me actually sounds uh, less realistic than the other instruments for me. I think it's just because I'm so used to hearing the horns in a scoring stage, in a cinematic hall, that in a drier setting, it doesn't sound as natural to me personally. But maybe that's the type of vibe you're going for in that case. More power to you, you know? Now, I really like the real vibrato in the trombone. I think it sounds really great because the player actually takes a moment to kind of ease into the vibrato rather than starting with a full vibrato right away. So it does sound more natural that way, and I kind of like that result. Then we have the trombone muted. And finally, the bass trombone. All right. So overall, I actually really like the amount of dynamic range available in the different instruments. And I'm not exactly sure whether it's one dynamic layer or multiple that are crossfading, but in either case, it does sound like the crossfading is relatively smooth. So it's not like a very noticeable difference between the piano layers versus like the forte layers, if that's the case, you know. But overall, what I would use this library for mainly are solo lines because they do have a very clean and pristine sound. And, having the options of these different vibes is also really cool to kind of dial in that tone you're going for. The only thing is that if you do decide to go with one of these vibes, you want the rest of the mix to also kind of match that vibe you're going for within the instrument in Mojo 2. So you would have to kind of settle the mix to kind of match the vibe of your choice, you know? But other than that, the whole concept of big band and jazz and funk pop horns is a very it's like a treasure at the end of the tunnel that you can't quite reach. It's one that is so difficult to really nail because there's so many intricacies and nuances in the style that it takes so much finesse to really get a realistic result from these types of libraries. And while it's always easier just to hire real players, it does require a little bit more of an investment, but real players will always sound better than sample libraries. However, these sample libraries help us in many ways, not only to create demos and create somewhat realistic performances, but for the budget musician who literally just can't afford to hire a live player, even if they really, really want to. Sometimes it's really difficult to find that budget. So libraries like this that come out and constantly are improving and are receptive to updates and all that, I always applaud these companies, because there's, again, it's not a saturated market at all. There's definitely more room for growth and development in this area of jazz and pop horns and big band and that type of thing. So Mojo 2, I definitely think is a big step up in the 2.0 version compared to the previous ones. I always thought that Legato sounded a little bit choppy and not as realistic in the previous versions, but with this 2.0 update, I'm definitely much happier using it, I think. And I would definitely see myself using it if I need kind of a realistic solo line that's a little bit more romantic or whatever. But the addition of the Legato natural mode for me is something that's really cool, and I think it just allows it to be even more versatile than before. And so, yeah, I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into this library. If you're kind of into this type of music, pop, band, big band horns, let me know your thoughts on it. Let me know what you think of the sound, the playability, the Legato, the sound of it and everything like that. The interface, again, to me looks pretty cool. I think it's more or less intuitive, gives you all the things that you really need without being super overwhelming, so that's always really nice. And big props to Vibrato again for putting this library together and consistently updating it. It's definitely a big task, but yeah, it's amazing that companies are really dedicated to their products and are trying to improve them all the time. So I want to thank you again for watching this video. And again, if you don't have my sample library buyer's guide yet, I definitely recommend it if you are looking for kind of a condensed version of what I personally use on a daily basis. It includes like all the orchestral stuff, strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, even jazz libraries like this one, pianos, harps, everything like that. And it's all in one easy to read PDF that you can just go over and see what I personally like to use on a day-to-day for my mockups and my productions. So I want to give that to you as a gift for watching this video. And so thank you so much for watching. And again, let me know what you think of this library. Big thanks again to Vibrato for sending it over. And I definitely can see myself using this in the future for these types of productions. So thank you again. I'll see you in the next video, and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.